Things that happened right after I heard the president start talking about closing businesses down to just a small number, like 50 people, then the next day 10, then 3. Immediately, because I'm the economic development chair in our city, our town, I thought, well, this is going to make it almost impossible to do business. And so I got on the phone and called several of the restaurants in town that I know the owners well, and I also called some of our other business people, local banks, and I shared an idea, and it went over very, very well. So I immediately, the same day, this is within the first couple days of any announcements, I called Senator Scott's office and shared it. And it was about a plan that would backstop payroll, and it would be on an every 2 weeks basis. Businesses could go to the local bank, get a loan that could become a grant as long as they didn't lay people off. Why is that important? Because I run ads about being a financial planner and being someone who understands how to look ahead at the risks and plan for them. So this was an idea that was there before we had any of the layoffs. And my message to Senator Scott was, if you can tell the president, please tell businesses, don't lay your people off. We will backstop your payroll if necessary until we can all get back to work. The reason that's so critical is I did the math on it, and even if we had 30 million people that might have been laid off, as we did have, if we had not had to lay them off and we backstopped them through the government for 10 weeks at $20 an hour, that would have come up to about $240 billion. That's less than 1/8 of the original plan. And the original plan did a lot of things that caused unintended consequences, such as making unemployment so high, $23 an hour, that it became a moral hazard, a disincentive to go back to work. I'd rather stay out if I'm making that much more money than usual. So I think 2 things that we can do better. That's not Monday morning quarterbacking. I did give that idea up front, but it took too long to implement everything. But 2 things I think we can do better. One is we now understand what it means when you have something that's so communicable that people can catch so easily, like this COVID-19. We do understand now what distancing means. We understand why we need to do a whole lot more hand washing, a whole lot more disinfecting. I think we do understand now how to keep people safe and those that are most vulnerable to distance themselves or even stay home. But I also think we have to get our economy back. My one fear and concern is that with this unemployment that goes till July 31st, there are a lot of restaurants especially and other businesses that are saying we really can't even open up because we can't get the manpower we need until after. So August 1st is when a lot of things will open up. What a shame, because a lot of places are ready to open now.
Did we act too quickly or too fast or too strongly when it came to COVID?
I don't think we acted too quickly. I think we needed to do something immediately because we didn't know what we were dealing with. Until we understood more about how this virus spreads, until we understood whether there would be enough testing, and as soon as we figured out there wasn't enough PPEs and other equipment that was needed, I think it was really important to put a big brake on everything. My big concern is that once we started to get a handle on things, there was such a reluctance to let those businesses that said, hey, I can social distance in my business. Maybe they only had 2 or 3 people in a store. Maybe they could keep customers one at a time coming in but still stay open. I think we probably should have tried to let more businesses make their own decisions on that once we had the facts. But for the first week or 2 or several weeks, I think it was absolutely necessary to put the brakes on everything and see what we're dealing with.
Is that where you stand for a potential follow-up outbreak if there is something of that sort? What happens in October, say, if this pops up once more?
Well, I've said to a lot of people, you know, as awful as it is to say the term silver lining when you have so many terrible things happen, I think there's one small silver lining is that we have definitely learned. I mean, when have we ever in our history had all of us wearing masks, had all of us staying away from people, not shaking hands? We haven't done that before. Now we have. So I think that if we do have another breakout in the fall, we will probably be able to keep going and just keep our most vulnerable folks, especially elderly and especially folks that have any lung conditions or problems with their immune system, we'll be able to keep them safe, let them decide what they need to do, but keep the rest of everybody going. We are also at a place, I just met a fellow in the grocery store the other day, they stopped me and wanted to talk, and he was a big strapping fellow, but he actually had been through it and had a very bad case. 103-degree temperature for 10 days, but he said he's now giving plasma as much as you're allowed. I think every other week or every 2 weeks, and so there's going to be a lot of immunity by the time this comes around in the fall.
So your sense is not what some people say, this is just a bigger version of the flu. You believe this is something to be concerned about?
I believe that this is actually going to help us deal with the flu better too. People forget that the numbers of the flu can be really bad. There are quite a few years we've had, it's almost always at least 30 to 50 million cases in the country and 30 to 50,000 deaths, which is a lot. I don't think most of us were even aware it was that bad. So now we have a way that in dealing with COVID, we may actually end up being able to deal with the flu as well much, much better.
So once we get through COVID, now of course we've got a new crisis on our hand with the situations with racial injustice, et cetera, in the country and the way it's being handled. What was your first reaction as this has come up? Well, what was your first reaction to the Minnesota videotape and what happened back there?
Well, like so many people, I was horrified. When I saw that video, I was just sick to my stomach. And I actually had an interview that very next day with a group called Lexit, which are the blacks that have exited the Democratic Party. And right before my interview, which was at 4 in the afternoon, they had just announced that they had arrested and charged the murder of George Floyd. And I was so grateful that that had happened. I wish it had happened a lot quicker. There is just no place for that behavior in our country. There's no place for it in the world. And so one of the things I can truly say as a city council member who's very dedicated to both the importance and the critical role that our first responders, and including of course our police force, play, is that, but also very sensitive to our public and to people who feel marginalized in any way, shape, or form. I said on that interview, I said, you know, we need to come together with a lot better communication on a regular basis. And I will say that on Sunday morning in Charleston, we actually had a tremendous aftermath of terrible rioting. And it's a shame because Charleston is a place that's known for reaching out to all people and with love and compassion, and yet somehow the protest rally turned into, a lot of folks went home, but a few stayed, and they ended up causing havoc to over 100 businesses. So I was there first thing 8 o'clock morning, got a call, come down, I did, brooms, buckets, cleaned up glass. But I do say to folks, I say, you know, the way to avoid this happening is just what happened. I'm just going to give you an example. Yesterday in the community where I live, Mount Pleasant, we had a protest rally. It was planned for. Our police chief and our town administrator and mayor sat down with them. It ended up being incredibly peaceful. And the image of the police chief on his knee, hand embraced with the fellow who was the leader of the rally. And it was just so powerful. They can get their word out. We can all protest. We can use our First Amendment rights. And at the same time, we can protect and respect others' rights, which are the businesses that. So I would love to see us all come together in this and stop the rhetoric, stop the fighting, and say we need to move forward. You know, these are problems that should have been solved years ago. We've got to solve them now.
But then what is the solution to these problems, or what is your sense of what a solution may be to these problems that are so big right now?
I mentioned communication. I have, as a city council member, but also as a person in my career, I have people that are clients of all different backgrounds. I have people that had almost nothing when I sat down with them, and I helped them figure out how to save a little money so they could plan for their goals. I think one of the things that a lot of folks feel, and especially people of color, often feel marginalized. They feel like people just don't pay attention. They feel like people don't recognize what they go through. And I think the more we can do to reach out, which the other day I just had lunch with a family in our community that said, Kathy, you know, we really believe that you have a compassionate heart, but you need to try to see things through the lens of our eyes. And I said, help me do that, because that's how we're going to start to make a real difference, and that's how we can move forward together. So we need people genuinely saying, this is not going to be the way, as Americans, we can come together and we can solve these problems. So it's going to be communication, I believe, more than anything else. I've also reached out to a lot of pastors, just because pastors are people that, of course, their congregations look to when they're suffering or when they're upset about things, and I've reached out to a lot of them and had meetings as well.
Well, obviously, communication is an important part of the solution, but do you have any straight solutions for what should be done? You know, should police be held more accountable? Is there something tangible that can be done beyond communication?
Yes. So just so you know, I also made a phone call right after this happened the other week in Charleston area, and I said to our chief of police, I asked him, I said, what are we doing now? I said, I'm aware we've had at least one person dismissed since I've been on council from the force because of more aggressive behavior than the chief wanted. I said, what do you do? How do you make sure we don't have this? And he said, we formed a group called the Criminal Justice Reform Council, and it's leadership from all Tri-County in that area, Berkeley, Dorchester, and Charleston County, and it's police chiefs, officers from the force, mayors, and other elected officials sitting down together to say, we need to make sure our folks are sensitive to the issues and do not ever treat anybody differently than anybody else. There is no question that when something has been done wrong, people should be treated the same way regardless of their skin color. And so we do have some concrete steps. I think we need to do even more of that, but I believe we're already well on our way in our area.
Your main opponent, did you take a glass of water? I know you had.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Your main opponent is very pro-president, obviously very supportive of the president, not saying that you're not in any form. But the question is, where does that balance right now with the polls seeming to lean against the president and disappointment with what he does? 80% of people believe he's doing the wrong thing when it comes to bringing us together. How, as a Republican, does that change anything that you want to do, or how do you work with Democrats, or how does that all happen for you beyond that?
Well, first of all, I'm very honored, maybe even proud, but certainly honored to say humbled rather than proud, to say that I actually received 2 different endorsements from papers last week that were considered almost opposite in their thinking in a way, and one is the Charleston Mercury, which is considered very conservative, and the other is the Charleston City Paper, which is considered a little bit more left-leaning. And I answered all the questions honestly on both, and I had interviews with both, and somehow they both came to the same conclusion, that I was the person that had the best opportunity to really represent our district. And I think that's because while I do have a business background and a finance background, and I understand how to fix some of the most critical issues facing our country today, like deficit spending, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, that are not sustainable if they keep on the same path they're on right now. We need to save those programs for all Americans. I also understand how to bring jobs, and when you are working and you have a good job like we did before coronavirus, we had extremely low unemployment across all ethnic backgrounds. All socioeconomic groups and all ethnic backgrounds had the lowest unemployment in history. And I say that because I think I can message so much more compassionately, and perhaps bring across a process of, hey, just because I do want to help people have a job and work doesn't mean I don't care that it's hard for people, and doesn't mean that I'd like to find solution. Why is it that you can't find a job? What is it about your service? Is it because of childcare issues? Is it because of this? So I think if you're willing to listen and take the time, I will say I don't blurt. I think between tweeting and other things, our president's style of communication tends to be rather sudden a lot of times, and I think that maybe we need we need to have people that help message what's being said in a much more thoughtful way.
What do you feel about the job he's doing in this situation, in this crisis right now?
There have been pressures from all sides on this thing from the very beginning, and a good example of that is when he felt that we should stop having people coming in from China, so he stopped the flights coming in. And actually, it turns out, if you look at different communities, such as in South Carolina, a tiny little community actually was the first one that not only had an outbreak, but a hot spot, and it turned out those folks had been traveling overseas and brought it back with them. So it made perfect sense. If China was where this originated, which we knew pretty quickly, why not stop the flights? He got a tremendous amount of heat for that, as if he was a xenophobe and a racist. And then later on it was figured out that that probably saved tens of thousands of lives. So I think if there were a way to message things a little bit more carefully and thoughtfully, so that people would see, look, this is an effort to try to do the right thing. It's not always going to work. When you have something this sudden, when you have something that comes out of the blue like this, it's going to take some work. Now, I think some of the recent things, when you're, I have a very strong heart for my faith and my religion. I'm very respectful of other people's religion, but I'm not sure about some of the messaging recently. Some people took the Bible thing with, oh, he's trying to show that this is the way to solve problems, but I'm not sure if that was the right way to go about it. But again, I won't stand in judgment, because there's a lot of pressure right now, and I think maybe the daily meetings weren't so great. I think both he and Governor Cuomo both had daily meetings, and I think maybe it became a little bit tiresome for a lot of folks. In the beginning it was helpful, later on it became a little tiresome.
This is obviously the beginning. You hope that you will continue on this message and through November. So far you stated multiple times that you believe the people out there and yourself are the ones to beat Joe Cunningham in this case. In fact, you've called him a grandstander at times for what he's done. Why is it that your message is so important? What do you think Joe Cunningham is doing wrong in this term that he's had so far?
I don't think I've used the word grandstander, actually. I don't tend to call names like that. What I've said is
that he was grandstanding, that
okay.
It's not the time for grandstanding.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call a name. There's a difference between using it as a verb than name. No, it is. I mean, I don't usually name call. That's just not my style. I believe right now we have some very, very serious problems facing our country that can make a huge difference for everyone, for Republicans, Democrats, Independents, everyone. And those are things that have a lot to do with our security, starting with our financial security. A lot of people day to day going about their lives don't really have a way of seeing how impactful it is when we're printing money. $2 trillion of printed money. And it's like, what does that even mean? It's not counterfeit, it's a term that we use in the financial world, but it means that we are devaluing the dollar. And in the long run, this is very, very risky. So we need people that understand why that's a problem and why we need to plan for sudden tragedies and bad events, get ready for them ahead of time, which is a big part of who I am. I don't believe that Joe's background gives him that skill set. So it's not that he's a bad guy, he's a very nice person. We've met several times and talked a number of times. So it's not about that, and it's not personal attacks. It's about what do we need to be done right now and who has the skill set and qualifications to help make that happen.
Well, just finally on that level, and we've gone sort of broad with so many things, but specific to our area and to the Low Country right now, obviously tourism is a huge issue and what's going to go on from here. It seems like things are coming back, restaurants, the rest of it. What's your message to the Low Country on what you can do to help them in the coming months and years as this continues on, and what we need to do in the new normal?
I believe some of the biggest things facing our area, which are not unique to our area, but certainly are exaggerated because we're on the coast here, and of course because we are so popular. This is the #1 destination spot in the country, and so we've been attracting all new people to move here as well as lots and lots of tourists, which we love. Come visit, but we do have to deal with our infrastructure issues. We have serious issues with flooding. We have serious issues with the roads being overcrowded and heavy traffic congestion, and a lot of these things are not solved nearly as quickly as they could be because we have federal regulations that delay things way longer than what seems reasonable. So we need to make sure we do things that are careful about how we handle it in terms of the environment, but I don't think it should take 5, 10, 15 years to study that. That's one issue. Another thing is people say, well, I'm very, very concerned about making sure that whatever infrastructure plan our country puts in place, we don't do it totally on the backs of taxpayers. We need to look at other ways, and I have some of these ideas on my website, kathylanding.com, Kathy with a K. I have several fireside chats that talk about free market solutions on how to solve things like infrastructure, and I've actually put some of these things into practice in our own community, including some affordable housing. It was very much pushed to do that with taxpayer money. I found another way, encouraged a developer that was willing, and then we were able to make that happen. So there's a lot of things we can solve in our district, and I'm very excited to help make that happen through Washington.